Hello and welcome to this video overview of C.E.R. Inc. C.E.R. Inc. is a game where players play as tech companies, shady tech companies at that, trying to vie for control over contracts and trying to complete them before other players can mess them up. This game is about being efficient as a tech company while, like I said, messing with everyone else. So, the way this game works is at the beginning of the game, a number of contracts gets flipped over face up from this deck here in the middle. It's called the contract deck, and these are contracts. And a number of these get flipped up equal to the number of players. So we're playing a two-player game, so I flipped over 2 contracts. Then each player draws 8 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And chooses 2 of them to be their starting employees. After everybody's chosen 2, all players flip their 2 face up, draw 2 cold hard cash cards from their cold hard cash stack. By the way, each player gets a set of cards here, and each set is exactly the same. So my set over here is exactly the same as my opponent's over there. So we all draw 2 cold hard cash cards to add to our 6 other cards in hand. And the round may begin with the first player who has the first player token. So in this game, you do one of 2 things on your turn. You can take an action with a employee, or you can pass. Taking an action with employee is actually pretty simple. Before I show you that though, I'm going to quickly show you a client. On a client card, there is 3 values which are always there: interest, work, and victory points. Interest is the number of tokens needed for the card to come from the middle of the table into somebody's play area. And work is the number of tokens needed to move from the play area to the victory point stack. And victory points is the number of victory points it's worth. Basically, victory points are how you win the game. On each employee, which like I said is what you do actions with, there is 2 stats which are always there and a special ability. 3 stats which are always there and a special ability. The cost to use is basically the price to use the employee. The charisma and skill are on every employee, and the special ability at the bottom is distinct for each employee, apart from a few specific employees called stacking employees. I'll get back to them later. So when you take an action with an employee, the first thing you do is you pay the cost. So that employee I showed you had a cost to use of 2. I take 2 cards from hand, and I discard them into a discard pile. Then I can use one of the 3 things on the card: the charisma, the skill, or the special ability. Like I said, you can only use one of these, and once you've used one of these, your turn is over. So I'm going to, for example, in this example, use charisma. So this character's charisma is 3, so I can take 3 tokens from my supply and put them on a card. So I'm going to put them on this card. Right. So these tokens are called interest tokens. The idea is basically I'm trying to make this client want to allow me to work for them. So, but they're going to shop around first. So people are going to try and also stop me from getting this, or they're going to allow me to waste my time trying to woo this client even more. The interest of this card is 4. Currently there's 3 tokens on it. If someone was to place more their tokens on it though, there'd now be 5 tokens on it. Now, assuming that there's equal to or over the number of interest tokens listed on the card, so there's 5 tokens on it and it says interest 4, this client will choose who gets this contract, and they'll choose whoever has the most tokens on the card. If there's a tie, then whoever places another token on the card that would break the tie gets the card. So for example, assuming that I have 3, and my opponent has 2, I get this contract right now. So I get to place this in my play area, and the tokens come off. Now if I was to use skill, I can take the number of tokens. So again, this talented has skill 3, so I get 3 tokens. So I get that number of tokens, and I can place them on any card in my play area. So for example, I can take these 3 tokens and place them on this client. Now if I put a number of tokens onto this card equal to or exceeding the work value of the card, I can then remove all the tokens, flip this over, and put it into my score pile. it is now worth victory points at the end of the game, and it's also safe from grubby little fingers of other players. So, during the round, we're all going to start discarding cards for various reasons, and then at some point, somebody's going to choose to pass. So let's say I pass now. I have 4 cards left in hand. When you pass, you place all the cards left in hand face up in front of you. I meant to actually show these off, so I'll discard these 2 instead. So I'm going to place all these cards face up in front of me. These cards that I placed up in front of me are new employees that I can use later. Some employees are stacking employees, and when you employ them, they just stack on top of an employee you already have. And they'll all have the same name. So these are all wage slaves. After everyone in the round has passed, we go into a new round. There is one extra thing about passing, though. If you pass and somebody before you in turn order has not yet passed, they have to discard a card. So seeing as my opponent is the first player and I passed before them, they have to discard a card. So if there was 4 players in the game and there was, let's say, I was the 3rd player in turn order, the 2 players before me in turn order would have to discard a card when I passed, but the player after me would not. However, if the player after me discarded a card, then I and the 2 players before me would all have to discard a card. So if you are first, there's a disadvantage of playing slowly. You want to try and get as much done as quickly as possible so you can get rid of this darn first player token, because having the first player token is actually quite a disadvantage in this game. So when the round is over and everybody's passed, everybody draws 6 more employee cards and 2 more cold hard cash cards. I didn't quite explain what these cold hard cash cards do, but basically when you employ them, they're worth a victory point. So if I was to employ these on my last turn, I would have scored some victory points into my score pile instead of getting an employee on the board. During the final round, so the 4th round in this game, instead of getting any more employees, instead you would have run through your entire employee deck by that point. You'll just get 8 cold hard cash cards. So you'll get 8 points worth of cards in your hand, and you have to decide how many of those points you want to spend on doing actions before passing the final round. Also, at the beginning of each round, a number of contracts gets placed face up on the table equal to the number of players. A number of contracts get added to the group of face up contracts on the table, so that the number of face up contracts equals the number of players. So as there's 2 on the table, and I took 1 last round, I add 1 face up on the table to make the number on the table equal the number of players. And that's pretty much it in terms of gameplay. Whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game is the winner in their score pile. There is a few extra little bits and pieces though. I mentioned that all these employees have special ability, and some of these abilities are quite interesting. For example, there is a character which is called the Assassin who can kill other players' employees, literally by just taking them and discarding them. They're gone. They're dead. But some of the employees also allow you to blackmail. And blackmailing, you take one of these tokens and you place it on an employee. Now, when you place it on an employee, basically they can no longer use their special ability text. They can still use the rest of their card, but they cannot use their special ability text. Now, killing and blackmailing a stack of employees works a little differently. When you blackmail a stack of employees, they are all considered blackmailed. So if I was to place a blackmail token on here, they would all be considered blackmail. And for the wage slaves, that means that this stack of employees skill goes from 4 to 0. They have 0 skill if they get blackmailed. That's pretty bad. However, when you assassinate one of these wage slaves, you just discard 1 of the cards. They've only killed 1 of the wage slaves. Another thing that can happen in the game is there's these things called victory point tokens, and these are worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. These can end up either on contracts, and if these contracts are completed, they are scored, or they can be on employees, and if these employees are still alive at the end of the game, they are also scored. So assassins can also be used for that. There's also a few other things like lures, which allow you to steal contracts from other players, which are incomplete. There is ways of getting these clients to choose somebody to complete their contract before enough tokens are on the board, and there's a few other things you can mess with that can mess with your other players, like making them discard cards and do a few other things. Either way, that this game's been quite a success. I've had quite a number of people say that they've really enjoyed it. I've had to mess a bit with the balancing, and there is a number of different ways of completing contracts and being a mean person to your fellow players. But yeah, I've had a number of different people try a number of different routes to victory, which has been very interesting. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you later. Bye.